What up, what up?
Howdy.
This is Revolving Show with Molly.
And Joe.
Yes. It's a shame because this week we're not actually doing a show.
No.
We bigged ourselves up too much last week by discovering extraterrestrial life.
Yeah, I mean, we can't really get any higher than that.
No. So what we've decided to do today is to not do a show.
Not at all.
Because we've run out of ideas.
Yep, I'm done. I'm ready to retire. I've earned my nickel.
I'm completely spent.
Yep.
And I feel like we've given you enough, you ravenous monsters.
I'm going to put all my money into a nice savings account and then buy a boat.
That sounds very sensible.
Thank you.
I'm going to spend it all.
On what?
Disneyland.
Oh.
So that's where I'm going.
Cool, good for you, man.
Yeah. So we won't be back after this.
No, this is the last one.
We're running out. This is the last ever Revolving Show, as far as we're concerned, unless we come up with something good
for next week.
In which case we will be back.
But don't hold your hopes out.
Don't hold your hopes out.
Yeah, don't hold them out in the cold.
Definitely.
Bring them in. They need to be warmer.
Anyway, we will not be back after this.
No, this is the last one. Last ever Revolving Show. Hello there. Hi. So, I've just wandered into the studio and it was empty, so I decided that this is my show now. I suppose I better introduce myself. I'm Sandy Sheldon Shaw. I am a lady of 43 years young, and, well, I thought, I'm in the student union, I'm past my best, so I better leave something behind for the young'uns that live here, and I'm going to tell you all my life story, and you're going to have to listen to it. You have no choice. So tune in and buckle down, Broncos, because this is my time. I'm Sandy Sheldon Shaw. Now, it all began a few years ago. I'm not good at maths, so I don't want to go back that far. I don't want to tell the exact dates, but I was born, and it was a very, very cold night. My mother, she was not pleased about the birth. Didn't know it was happening. I was like a toilet baby, basically. I was born in the toilet, and it was a light splash, and then I had to be dried off and put in a cold room because it was in the middle of winter and it's freezing cold out. Single glazed house in the sort of countryside that I'm sorry, it's making me emotional. And going back this far, my memory is difficult. Now, it was a very cold winter, and I was dried off from the toilet water that I was born in and laid inside a shelf because I wasn't expected. They didn't have any cribs or anything prepared. And I was just a little bit, I didn't cry much until I started to teethe, and then I was a screaming nightmare, apparently. That's where the problem started with me and my mother. But I'm getting ahead of myself. As a baby, I was quite adorable. I had long curly hair. I was born with very long curly hair, which doctors were amazed by because they'd never seen hair that long. Now, anyway, back to the story. Long curly hair that was on top of a baby's head. Now, it was covered in grebe from birth, which is not what you want, but once it was dried out, it was quite luscious. The talk of the town, actually. The whole village came to visit my mother and the miracle toilet baby that she had birthed. They sold sort of tickets at a nickel a visit, and my mother came rich in currency she couldn't spend in this country, which was fascinating, really. Now, as I grew older, the town became less obsessed with the toilet baby because I was no longer a baby, and babies are only cute when they're babies. But this is besides the point. I grew up, and I was well loved amongst my peers. I joined the local school, and I enjoyed my subjects very much. I was particularly good at science and maths, so naturally I became an artist. I used my knowledge in the biological sort of sphere to inform my artistic creations. I mainly did my work within taxidermy, so I was when I was about 15, I stuffed my first otter. It was great because this otter had been bothering the town. It had been stealing underwear from clotheslines, it had been nibbling pies from windowsills, and the whole town was in quite a ruckus about it. They didn't want it anymore. So, I managed to find the den of the otter. I then strangled it and stuffed it and put it on display, and the whole town was ravenous for this display. They were happy to see it stuffed and dead and no longer attacking their pies, and I gave it a little hat, and they all thought that was quite a lot of fun. So it was a very small hat, like a little top hat. And the impetus behind this, besides wanting to sort of save the town from their local menace, was to show how, much like this otter, we humans are also beasts. And we can put on as many fancy hats as we want, but we are always the animals we are within. My taxidermy continued on from this point, but it is, as far as the story of my youth is concerned, it is no longer that important. I was friends with 2 other people in my school at the time. One was a little girl named Sarah, and the other one was a boy named, oh gosh, it was a long time ago. What was he called again? What was his name? I think his name was Donald, yes. It was a little boy named Donald. Now, Donald was very fond of me. By the end of secondary school, he announced that he loved me, but unfortunately I did not feel the same way, and I had to cut off our relationship from this point forward. I've never heard from Donald since. I've not looked him up either, because I feel like he shouldn't go over old ground. But when we were young kids, we had a lot of fun together. We'd run around in the wilds and collect bushes and twigs and build huts, and we'd go camping, and it was a lot of fun. Very much like a sort of a country living kind of exploration. We went on many adventures as well, because when we went into the woods, we heard that there was an old lady living in a cabin out there. Naturally, we wanted to go and see the witch, but we found out she genuinely was, in fact, an old lady, and she gave us cookies and made us scarves, and we became great friends. But Vera, naturally, being an old lady, didn't live much longer than a few weeks after we met her, so that was a shame. I do miss Vera. She was a good old bird. Now, as I progressed into secondary school and beyond, my studies became more advanced, and I received my degree from the University of Durham. I liked Durham. It was a good town. Now, when I became an adult, this all changed. I sort of lost my way in the world, and I had no sort of guidance as to where I was going forward, because up until that point I had been following a series of exams and subjects and the guidance of teachers that sort of showed me what I was meant to be doing. After school, this all fell apart, and I became a wandering vagrant. This was admittedly a dark time for me, but I think I made the most of it. I squatted in a few different houses in a few different towns. I became a master pickpocket, and I eventually ended up joining a circus. This circus was a lovely, lovely place to be. There was an angry Russian clown, 2 trapeze artists in a torrid love affair, and a dancing bear who I became very close to. The dancing bear was named Bubbles. He was adorable, very cuddly. But unfortunately, he escaped one year, and the townspeople of that particular village went on a hunt. They found him, they shot him, and now he lines the wall of their town hall. I do not like visiting this village. They are foul people, and Bubbles deserves better for his memory. Now, within the circus, the Russian clown had the most interesting backstory, and now I shall go into that in great detail following a brief musical intermission. I don't know, I'm going to give it a look. I'm still very new to this technology, seeing as I've just walked into the place. But I'm going to play you one of my favourite tunes that I've ever heard, and I hope you enjoy it, and we'll have a good old time. Yes. Okay. Speak to you shortly. Hello Hello again. So this is me, Sandy Sheldon Shaw, and I'm currently telling you all about my life. I'm still alone in the studio, and I may have forgotten where I'd gotten to last with my story. Let me just recall. I think I told you about my little shelf bed when I was a baby, my stuffed otter, and I think yes, I remember where I'd gotten to. I was at my life within the circus. Now, I was about to tell you about the life of the Russian clown who I lived with within the circus. We became quite close friends, but we did not start out this way. In fact, when I first arrived, he was very confused as to what my purpose in the circus was. You see, I had no particular skills as far as circusing was concerned. I wasn't a juggler, I didn't do tricks, I wasn't a sham or a charlatan, and I particularly did not understand what it was to perform in front of people. I mainly did my work within the confines of a studio alone, where I could think pensively about what I'd made. Now, when I joined the circus, I had to earn my spot. I had to earn the clown's trust and his favour. I did this through a number of ways. First, he desired money. As I've already stated, my life as a vagrant had made me quite adept at pickpocketing. So whenever they had a new audience, I would go around the stalls, bumping into people and stealing their wallets. Now, this was admittedly a moral grey area as far as acts were concerned, because these people clearly had enough money to spare, being able to afford trips to the circus, but they did not realise they were being stolen from whilst at the circus. I mean, you could probably guess that might happen, but they did not know, and I feel somewhat bad about this in the winter of my life, at 43 years old. I would steal numerous wallets and remove their cash contents, and occasionally a card or two if I felt like I could probably guess the number. If they looked particularly dim, this was a safe bet. The clown liked this, so I continued this up until maybe 3 months into working for the circus. Now, the second way that I won the clown's favour was through my skills as a baker. This was a skill I had learned from my mother back when I was a child. She would bake me lovely sweet buns and a number of different kinds of biscuits. I'm particularly fond of oat and peanut biscuits, as they are crunchy and they're nutty and they sit well within your stomach. Easily digested, if you understand what I mean. Now, I would make the clown these biscuits, these particular loving biscuits I'd learned to make from my mother. The clown understood the sentimental value of these biscuits and was very pleased with the offering. He is still yet to trust me, however, despite the fact my biscuits were delicious. The final way I earned the clown's trust was by learning to ride his tiny tricycle over a hot-burning coal trail. This was his most complicated and daring trick, and he would only accept me as his own if I learned how to do it with aplomb. This was more difficult than it might appear. The tiny tricycle, when I say tiny, I mean it was particularly small. It was about the size of a large melon. And a large melon, if any of you have seen one, is still quite a small object. So I would have to scrunch myself up onto this tricycle, despite the fact I'm quite a dainty woman anyway. I would definitely have to crease myself up into like a sort of origami version of myself and perch upon the top of this tricycle. This in itself was quite a feat. But the clown was not satisfied. Soon I learned how to tricycle along on top of this tricycle. This required me to kind of rotate my legs in a V position, with them poking out like sort of the boss eyes of a dog in opposite directions, rotating slowly as I teetered along the floor. The first time I attempted this, I travelled about 1 metre before falling over. The third time, about 1 yard before falling hard on my face. The clown enjoyed this. And then the fourth time, because I'm skipping one, because it wasn't that was even worse. The fourth time, I managed it. I could roll around on the tricycle quite easily. This, again, was not enough for the clown. The clown demanded more. So he set up his coal trail. The coal trail is particularly long, maybe about 100 yards of coal. And all of this coal is still red hot. It glows, and if I were to stray too long on top of it, the tires of the small child's tricycle would melt, and then would be impossible to ride with any kind of ease. I was naturally quite nervous about taking on this sort of trial, but the clown insisted I do it. The clown was very insistent that I do it. So, about a week in advance of my final test, I practiced night and day, speeding along the roads of, I think it was Coventry at the time, speeding along the roads of Coventry on my tiny tricycle. Several times I got pulled over by the police because I was riding too fast. But once I told them my story, they naturally were very sympathetic, and they encouraged me to get as fast as I could so that I could beat the clown at his own game. With the support of the police and the other local constabulary, I was able to achieve the optimum speed to go across hot coals without burning my tricycle. I went to the clown the morning of the test with great confidence and a sly smile on my face. He was more concerned with the fact that I had many grazes along my body. I think he could tell that I'd been practicing religiously, and that I may have learnt the skill well enough. This was not exactly what he wanted. I think he wanted me to fail, or at least get burned in some way. So he added extra petrol to the path. So certain areas were literally lit, literally on fire, and I had to slalom down the coal path, which was not what I had originally intended to have to do. Originally it was just going to be a straight line, full speed, maximum velocity, but unfortunately the clown wanted to make this more difficult. I was ready for this. I was prepared. I'd done the practice. I knew what I was capable of, and I felt confident that I could beat the clown. And I arrived. I perched myself upon my red tricycle, and I looked down the path. I saw the flames towering, and I knew deep down in my heart that this was the defining moment of my life so far, and I had to overcome it. So, with the thought of my friends, the old lady who quickly departed from death, I thought of that speed with which she left this earth and thought, you know what, I'm going to take that too. I'm going to use that speed and speed along this fire, and if I die, then I know I did the best I could. And I succeeded. I made it across the path, and I sped with the speed of the wind, and the clown was aghast. He couldn't believe it. He had to accept defeat, and after a moment of pure disdain, he accepted me in his life as his very own daughter. I wasn't expecting that particular part of the deal, frankly. I just wanted to join the circus. But I was now the adopted daughter of this Russian clown who honestly could not speak a single word of English. We only really understood each other through sign language. And I had a very deeply personal and satisfying relationship with him ever since. He died maybe about 20 years ago, and to this day I do miss him quite a bit. We never learned how to communicate with each other fully, and he still occasionally tried to test me from time to time, lighting things on fire, as you do, but he just wanted to make sure I was the best performer I could be. My job in the circus following that event was to assist the clown within his tricks, and due to my incredible speed on the tricycle, to go around offering snacks at maximum pace throughout the event, optimizing our snack sales within the circus. This was perhaps one of the happiest times of my life. Working in the circus, I got to see the entirety of this country. I went abroad to France and to Estonia, and I traveled around. I had many torrid love affairs with local people, and I'm sure they miss me terribly ever since. I occasionally get letters. I can't read them because I never learned the languages of the countries I went to, but I assume they say only good things. Now, my life in the circus unfortunately had to end. I moved on to being a world traveller because I got a taste for it in the circus. I had to see the rest of the world. I had to experience the rest of my life. And the way I did this Well, I started off traveling with my fiancé, my first fiancé. His name was Harris, and I loved him dearly. We went to Paris. He was from a very wealthy family, but he had rejected his wealth and sort of status and circumstances to run away with me because his family hated me. They thought, no, you don't want to marry this circus girl who stuffs dead animals for a living. No. You want to marry Miss Lady Portonsberry, who lives in the mansion the road over. Miss Lady Portonsberry was a terrible woman. She had a high-pitched laugh and a little spotty nose, and I was not a fan, but I digress. Harris and I were very much in love, at least that's how I thought it was, because we went to Paris, but before we went away, he encouraged me to gather all my assets, to collect them in cash, and to carry all of my worldly possessions, my jewels, my gold, and bring it with me to Paris. I thought that this was perhaps a slightly strange thing to ask your fiancé to do, but I was very much in love with him, and I thought, he's probably got a good reason for wanting me to do this. Maybe we're going to run away together. Maybe we're going to start a new life in the French wilds, eating cheese and drinking wine with hairy men. But this was not the case. We arrived, and I met him at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower carrying my bags of gold, and he immediately whacked me on the head and stole everything I was carrying. I was left with a large bump on my forehead, lying around in the plaza of Paris, with no money to my name and only a small bag of oranges, my favourite fruit. This was inconvenient. This was not what I wanted to have happen. The love of my life, up until that point, had run away from me. I've never heard from him since. I assume he's living very well off of my jewels and riches, because, as you know, I am a very adept pickpocket and collected many beautiful trinkets and coins over the past sort of 30 years. I imagine he's living the life of Larry, actually, a little bastard. But it's besides the point. My life was changed forever. I was now a vagrant in Paris. I had nothing else I could do besides start up my old habits of pickpocketing and squatting amongst the city. Fortunately, Paris is a very busy city with many tourists with excesses of wealth, so I felt not too bad about stealing their money. I gathered all the francs I could, several thousands francs, and I went to go convert them into other currency which I could use to travel around the world, because I thought, well, there's nothing left me back in the UK. Harris might be there and I don't want to see him, so I thought I'm going to keep travelling east. I'm going to discover what the world has for eastward for me. I continued through Germany. I became very fond of sausages, or Wurst as they call them. I got lost in Germany. I became a Frau for a few years. I'm not really sure what that is still, but apparently I was good at it. They were very fond of me. They kept calling me their little Liebchen and all sorts, and that was quite sweet, I suppose. But this was not to continue, because I had other things to do, other places to see. I enjoyed all the schlosses, though. I like schlosses. Big castles, big buildings that were built by very wealthy people within that country. Almost like fairy tale castles, really. I probably should have spent more time in the woods there. I think I would have found more lovely old ladies, but I wouldn't have been able to understand what they were saying necessarily, so maybe that wouldn't have been so good. I'm not too sure. Anyway, to continue, I continued along, and you know what? I got to a sort of far east in Europe, and the accents became even more sharp and harsh. The weather was colder, and you know what? After being born in the winter and being homeless for a very long portion of my life so far, I thought, well, this isn't for me anymore. I'm going to go somewhere warmer. So I pickpocketed a few more wealthy people. I went to a charity gala and stole their money. I was then labelled as a most wanted criminal in Bulgaria. They still are looking for me, but that's okay. They're not going to find me, I don't think. And I started to head south. I travelled down. I joined carriages, the horses of travelling travellers. We became very good friends. I think I learned the Romany language to a certain extent, Definitely became very good at their magic. I was a soothsayer for a little while, but I basically just made everything up. They didn't have any idea what I was talking about, really. But that's besides the point. It's what I did was I continued down to Morocco. Here's where I met my second fiancé. And this is perhaps one of the darkest stories of my life. You know what? In preparation for this particular part of my tale, I will take another little break. I'll play a different song, maybe a song I enjoyed whilst spending time in Paris as a vagrant, and I will come back and tell you about Morocco and Matthias, my love in Morocco. So I'm back, it's me, it's Sandy Sheldon Shaw, and we have now reached Morocco. This was an interesting part of my life. So it was in Morocco that I really perfected might be the better word, I perfected my skills as a pickpocket. As I was roaming through the market streets of Morocco, looking at all the beautiful piles of spices and the delightful foods and clothes and all kinds of wonderful smells and textures that you can find there, I was getting better and better at stealing the money from the back pockets of men and ladies within the market. Up to a certain point, I was stealing about 5 wallets every minute. This is easy enough within the markets because they're completely crammed with people. Within this market, you can probably stand at any point with about 5 people standing, sort of touching you, like very much physically very close to your body. And all you need to do is run your hands quickly in front of you, picking every pocket. Now, little did I know that a young man was following me through these streets, observing everything I was doing. He was paying very close attention, unlike anyone else, because I'm quite an easy person to ignore. I've got sort of mousy, curly hair now, not quite as luscious as when I was a baby, and I'm quite short. But this young man was paying very close attention to what I was up to, and he grabbed me in the street and he pulled me into an alleyway. Now, I was fairly certain that I was about to die at this point because, you know, being yanked into an alleyway at any given moment is never a pleasant thing to have happen, and almost definitely implies you're about to either be mugged or murdered. I went for the latter, but I was incorrect. This man was just very interested in my pickpocketing skills, and he wanted to learn how to do it himself. I was apprehensive about teaching him how to do it. I had to learn how to do it out of necessity, whereas this man, I don't think, needed the money particularly, and he just seemed interested in the idea of stealing. But I was bored, so I taught him how all of what I knew, my speed, my technical ability, and the lightness of my fingers. And so he took a long time to get good at this. To start with, he was caught several times. He lost one hand because that's just the way they do things there. But after a while, he learned to use that stump to his advantage, and he was able to tap people on the shoulders and have them look in one direction with his stump, and then pick his pocket from the other. He did not get as good as I was at stealing multiple pockets, because, you know, with only one hand, it's quite difficult. But he became good at knowing who to steal money from in order to get the most amount. I think he wasn't very discriminate about maybe their lives. I always tried to figure out who might be the most well-off, who didn't need the money. He would just go for the one who seemed to be carrying the most. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the people who have the money to spare. It just means that at that time they're just carrying quite a bit of money. I fell in love with him. This is what happens. You fall in love with the men you spend your time with, or the women. You know, my third fiancé is a whole different story. But my second fiancé, I did fall madly in love with him. I think it may have been more of a physical romance than anything else. He was very, very sexy. But I eventually had to tell him that enough was enough. You can't go around just stealing money from anything that moves. You'd be discerning, you'd have discretion. And he did not like this. By this point, we were sort of deciding to head down south. We were going towards South Africa. And I decided that this was probably a good move because as you go through Central Africa, the amount of money available to be stolen decreases. And, he might sort of show different character traits that I might find more appealing than his interest in my talents and the skill with which he had learned to use them. But, and this is a real shame, he, with a lack of people of wealth to steal money from, he just stole from the poor. I did not find this particularly attractive. I fell out of love with him, and we had a big falling out in the Sahara Desert. Now, there's something in the Sahara that I did, which I'm not particularly proud of, but I think was the right thing to do. The night of our first and final large argument, I dug a very, very, very deep hole within the Sahara. I'd say probably about 8 feet deep, too tall to climb out of, and I pushed his sleeping body into the hole. He woke up very quickly after being pushed into the hole. You can probably expect this. Now, within the hole, he was very, very mad. He was trying to climb out, but as you know, sand is difficult to find purchase on because it breaks away quite easily. What he essentially did was create a large sort of bottle hole where it gets wider at the bottom and the top is still very much closed. A bit like the bottle prison you can find within the St. Andrew's Castle. And, what I did next is something that to this day, I probably should not have done, but I think I did the world a favour, because he was a nasty man, and I buried him alive. His body is still in the desert, and I will never tell anyone where it is, or how long it's been there, because I don't want to be nailed for this, but I thought I'd better admit to my crimes. And I really do feel like a load has been lifted off my shoulders. He was a nasty man, but I'm not a big murderer. It's not something that I get a kick out of. So it was the right thing to do. I do it again. Only to him. I'm not saying I'm going to go on a murder spree. I've lost some of that aggression. I just carried on moving south, and I forgot about him for a long time. It's only been in recent years that I've reconsidered what I did to poor Matthias, and think maybe I was a bit over the top. Maybe I could have just knocked him on the head and took his money like my first fiancé did. But that's just not the way it went down, and now he's dead, so there's not really much else I can do about it, so I better move on, really. So, I left my second fiancé for dead, buried in a hole in the Sahara Desert. There is no possible way he got out of that hole. I've never heard from him since, but I suppose you wouldn't go seeking out the woman who tried to kill you if you managed to escape. I continued further south, and I eventually reached South Africa. This was not the kind of place I liked. It was very segregated. They didn't like each other, the whites and the blacks, and I don't really mind. People are people. And I had decided that, I'm going to leave. This isn't for me. It's too violent anyway. And I hopped onto the first fishing boat and went even further south to Antarctica. Antarctica was a time. There were lots of penguins. It was cold, which I do tend to quite like after it had been a very warm couple of years in Africa. So I lived with the penguins for a while. When adopted me as their child, I got nested and sat upon by my mother penguin, and it was a large emperor penguin, so you can imagine how cozy and warm it was underneath my penguin mother. I got taught how to swim, which is something I never learned back in the UK. I learned to swim like a penguin, with great speed and dexterity, and I managed to save my colony from an onslaught of seals. Seals are very aggressive animals. Everyone seems to think they're the most adorable things in the world, and then they're not adorable. They're very dangerous. You should be afraid of them, especially the seal pups, because they pretend they're cute. They know that they're evil, and they will, at the first opportunity, bite you and try to kill you like they did to try to do to my mother and my 2 penguin siblings. I was not impressed by the seal's behavior, so I killed him and stuffed him and left him out in the snow as an example to all his fellow seal brethren. Fewer seal attacks have happened in that area ever since, I'm quite proud of this event. Now, I eventually had to accept that I couldn't stay with my penguin mother any longer because, well, I wasn't a penguin. And I was beginning to miss people. And you know what? You can't live on fish either. I mean, it was only fish. And it was very bony, and my digestive system was all up the creek because of it. So I found a small scientific exhibition. Sorry, it's a very difficult word for me to say. It was a small scientific expedition into the Antarctica. It was led by a man from, I believe it was a UK team, but he sounded very Scottish. Anyway, I found them. They were surprised to find me there, covered in feathers, but they agreed to take me home because essentially I knew more about the penguins than any other living person, having lived with them for about 2 years. And I went onto this boat. They too had a lot of fish, but they also had some sort of dried sort of bread crackers. I believe they called them hardtack, and a sort of stew that they cooked for a bag. And, life on the boat was quite a lot of fun. There was a female scientist there named Sally. I really liked Sally. She was a lovely lady, and we fell in love. Sally and I, we had a lot in common. We were both of a scientific bent. She appreciated my work in taxidermy. She was fascinated by my penguin family and my experiences with the Sea Lions. And we actually had a lot in common. I think, I said that the first fiancé was the love of my life, but in reality, I really feel like she may have been the one who got away. Because upon my return back to the UK, I could not move in with her. She was desperate that I live with her and that I meet her family and that I sort of fall into her life. But this didn't work out in the end because I couldn't settle down. I was a wandering soul, a rolling stone, and it wasn't going to work out for the best. Sally was disappointed to hear this. Not very disappointed actually, but we understood each other had to move on, and well, I still receive a Christmas card from her every year, and I'm pleased to hear that she's doing well and that her new fiancé is a lovely woman. Well, this is quite emotional for me, actually. I mean, I miss Sally. I miss her a lot, but I think independence is what I need. And it's done me good, I think. I think for the most part it's done me good. Although I still have never settled. I intend to leave St. Andrews upon the next morrow. I will wander the beaches later. I want to go down to West Sands and just sort of explore the sands and find some shells and maybe make a necklace or something, I don't know. And I want to sort of roll around in the water for a little bit. I know it'll be cold, it is November, but it's not often you get to see the North Sea, so I'll take a dip. And once I have achieved all this, I will send Sally a letter telling her about what I've been getting up to. If Sally is listening, she knows how I feel, so I won't dwell on that any longer. Well, I believe my time is nearly up. My life story there are a few more years left to tell. But, it's a long life, and it's still living, it's still growing, and I've got more things to do. I've yet to tell you about my musical career, or my experience as a local MP in Lichfield. But that is a story for another time. I think I shall leave you instead with a brief musical interlude and then a final thought of what you should do before I leave you for my next visit. Here now is something that I think will be a very uplifting close to this hour of conversation we have endured so far.
You do it makes us harder, better, faster, stronger. That don't kill me, can only make us stronger. I need you to hurry up. Princess on Apollonia, since OJ had isotoners. Don't act like I never told you. You know how long I've been on here.
Yes, that was Stronger by Kanye. And I think that's a good thing to close on. I think what we need to remember is that life can be difficult, but it's up to us to have strength and to move forward with that. And while being homeless and Well, first I started off as kind of a hero in my town, and then I was homeless for a long period. I became friends with the circus clown. I was a murderer, or I am a murderer. I joined a penguin colony, and I found the love of my life, sadly, who I had to leave behind. But every instance has made me a stronger and happier person ever since. And while there are plenty more stories for me to tell you, I think that so far you must have learned something. At least I hope so. I expect that someone should have learned something. I've tried my hardest to be informative, or at least on my life, and whether or not you found meaning in that is completely up to you, because this wasn't really about you at all. It's about me having a medium, a platform in which to ramble. And, well, that's where I'm going to leave, really. I've rambled for an hour, and you endured all of that. That's on you. You could have turned away, you could have left, you could have moved on with your life, but nope, you had to try and be a voyeur on mine, and that's totally cool with me, actually. I do it again. So you'll probably see me once more, maybe next semester. I've got some more travelling to do, but we'll see how that turns out. When next time I find an empty slot or an empty room, I will talk in it, and hopefully there'll be a radio station there. But until then, I'm Sandy Sheldon Shaw, and this has been my show, my life. This is my life. Sandy Sheldon Shaw.